It's another episode of the RSL Random Fan Podcast. I'm your host, Brant Goebel. I am joined by Scott Omer, again from the Designated Pundits. We have a great conversation. We talk about the surprise of RSL having such a great start to the season, third place at the World Cup break. We talk about Xavier Gozo. We talk about Diego Luna. We talk about all of the surprises that have made Real Salt Lake talk of Major League Soccer so far this season. We talk about the World Cup, the U.S. men's national team, and a whole lot more on this episode. Also, hit that subscribe button at our YouTube channel. Follow us, like us, leave us a review. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Do us a favor. We appreciate it. And have a great time listening to this episode. All right, another episode of the RSL Random Fan Podcast. We have a special episode tonight. Scott Omer from Designated Pundits is joining us to talk about Real Salt Lake, World Cup, and all kinds of soccer-related questions and conversations. So welcome, Scott. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
No, thank you so much. It is a huge pleasure to be back. Honestly, last time I was on the show, we had a really great conversation. I just when you guys reached out again and said, "Hey, you want to come back?" I was stoked, just absolutely stoked about it.
Oh, that makes me feel really good. And I apologize. It's just me, so we'll see if that's you
It's
have this
okay.
similar experience or if it was, the other guys. If it wasn't me, but
Their
they
loss.
obviously have jobs to do tonight or places to be that did not include doing a podcast. But me, I don't have a life, so here I am. No, thank you for joining us, Scott. Scott from the Designated Pundits. So let's jump right into it, Scott. We wanted to talk about Real Salt Lake so far this season. As I've
Yeah,
mentioned many times, I picked Real Salt Lake to finish 10th. At the World Cup break, I think I had them maybe having 12, 14, 15 points, maybe kind of along a similar line as last season. I didn't really have any reason to believe that the new signings would be much different from the track record from last season, So how do
yeah.
you, yeah, so been mildly surprised. I don't know. Where did you pick Real Salt Lake to be at this moment, Scott? Be honest.
I'll be very honest. I was very much along the lines that you were at. We did our RSL preview show with Alex Napolis from the RSL show. He kind of came in as the expert to help us on the designated pundits to look at RSL. Alex, I think, was a bit more optimistic than I was about the signings, but I was kind of with you. I thought, hey, I think some of the signings are good. I thought some parts of the team would get better, but I didn't see the team having like really dramatic improvement. Um, and I thought, yeah, at the end of the season, they're going to be in that like playoff bubble picture, sort of around 10th. And I just thought through the first part of the season, um, RSL usually plays better in the first part of the season, but I just thought that we would see that more of that coming through. I've been pleasantly wrong about that. A lot of the guys have stepped up more than I thought they would. Other guys are playing better than I thought they would. Other guys are integrating faster than I thought they would. That's all very positive for me. Uh, I wasn't super wild about the formation change. I'll be honest, I don't like the back five, back three is a like philosophical concept, but that has worked really well, and it's made Justin Glad look kind of like a new player. And it's I think that's kind of in a way it's extending his lifespan at RSL. So I have to give a lot of credit to the coaches there.
Yeah, I would have to be. I was excited for. I'm a little bit the opposite. I was excited for the new formation. I
Mhm.
really kind of like the three, yeah, 3-5-2, however, 3 men in the back, right? I really like that. My other team, and I only have two. I'm not that big of a, I only have two that I really follow, but Crowleytown, my other team, they had a lot of success with a back three. And if it's done right and you have the right players, it can be really exciting, on both sides because you do expose yourself in the back and that can be dangerous if you're not scoring goals like RSL was not
Mhm.
scoring goals last season. So let me ask you this: other than where they're at right now, what players or what stories are the most surprising to you that you didn't see that just kind of come out of the woodwork that were positive, and then kind of go follow up with that with things that haven't gone as well as expected? But let's focus on the
Yeah.
positive for a little bit.
Yeah, positive. That first question, that first part of the question, I want to break that up into two segments. So there's a first part of like um something that came out of the woodwork really unexpected is the youth movement for RSL. Now we knew there was talent coming out of the academy. We knew there was a pathway to get that talent from the academy through the Monarchs and into the first team. We saw that with Xavier Gozo's breakout last season. Um, I did not expect what looks like an entire class of players to come through as a group, but the way that they started, right, and a lot of this was forced by injury and availability, visas and stuff like that. But the way that like Luca Moises started the season and played well and didn't look out of place, right? Now he's obviously a really young kid, there's limitations, but doesn't look out of place. Aiden Hezerkani has has actually come in and not just in a couple of games, but every time he's on the field, he looks like a player who belongs with the first team unit. Um, you know, uh, I always get it backwards, but Dylan Griffin Dillon,
Griffin
the
Dillon.
guy, the guy with two first names. Same sort of thing though, right? I love the intensity that he moves around the field with. He plays with a lot of intensity and drive and purpose, which really fits a Pablo Mastroeni, system and team. And he looks like a guy that belongs in that first team unit. He looks like a guy who still has some growing to do in terms of his like soccer abilities and all of that, but he looks like a guy who is ready to take those steps.
I
And
I think Griffin Dillon. Let me just kind of be rude and jump in here, but
go on.
I like Griffin Dillon, but I like what Luca Moisa brings a little bit better. But I can see why that Griffin Dillon is getting the nod over Luca, and basically it's size and experience probably. But I think Luca is a
Mhm.
more dynamic player and has a bigger upside. But I thought that was interesting um,
I think Luca
when it comes to those two
solves
players.
I think Luca solves a different problem for Pablo. And I think you've nailed a really key thing. I think they do little different things and a little bit differently. I think Griffin offers a little more midfield presence, maybe a little more defensive solidity. He, like you said, he has a bit more size on him. They're both young guys, right? But um Luca Moisa, I think the reason that he was getting the nod early is because Diego Luna was out. Um and oh gosh. I want to
Zerkani,
say
Gila Vogie, a lot of the
Gila
guys weren't.
Vogie wasn't ready yet. That's the name I was blanking on for a sec. But Gila Vogie wasn't ready yet, and Pablo needed a little more creativity in the team. And I think Luca Moisa does that better than Griffin does.
Yeah, I agree. But I love. I think that's the biggest surprise is the youth and how they
Mhm.
have popped up. Not only in Real Salt Lake, but it's been a major theme all through Major League Soccer this
Oh, it's
season
a
with
big year
the
for it.
kids. New
Yeah.
York, that Hall kid and a bunch of others have
Hmm.
really been kind of standing out. I,
Yeah.
I, I
If you're
interrupted, but
not if you're not watching Adi Mehmeti over at the Red Bulls, you are missing out on a future U.S. men's national team center mid. He's look, Julian Hall's getting a lot of the attention because he scores the goals, but Adi Mehmeti is a tremendous player who has been a game in, game out starter in a center mid position in a New York team. It's really impressive what he's doing there. Um, and we should think about him in the same way that we think about like a Xavier Gozo. He's in that bracket where you're like that this is a future national team player.
That's exciting, and it's exciting to see these young players kind of like seems like it skips a generation every once in a while where one
Yeah.
generation just doesn't pick up the torch when it comes to the national team, but the youth coming up now seems like there is a lot of potential. But I interrupted. Else on these young kids from Real Salt Lake you want to share?
Well, I'm very impressed by them. It was a big surprise to me how ready they were. I wasn't surprised that Pablo wanted to lean on them. And I wasn't surprised by how well Pablo had prepared them, right? And sort of enabled them to go out and just be themselves. He preaches this very much like don't be afraid of your mistakes mentality, and that is a very good coaching style if you are trying to bring kids through because it's really easy for them to get in their heads to have one mistake and sort of live in that moment and not go out and express themselves on the field confidently after that. But he has this philosophy that's like don't really care, it's fine, the team doesn't care, everybody's bought into this, go out and play, we trust you to be here, just go do it, and if you make a mistake we'll figure it out, but it's not the end of the world. Like I love that because it allows those guys to go out and do stuff. And Xavier Gozo's the biggest winner from that by far because if you watch him, he does make a lot of mistakes, but he has been sort of permitted to not live in those moments. He is allowed to live in the here and now and to just go and try again. And I absolutely love that. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up, which is the signings. I was a little underwhelmed by RSL's off-season business. I was worried about Guy Lavogie. His track record, his statistical goal contributions are not that great outside of like
You had the
one
one good
season.
season somewhere.
Yeah, one good season in Germany. I was really worried about that. I was like, we just signed, Juan Cruz a second time. And uh boy, I couldn't have been more wrong about that. And I'm ecstatic to be wrong about that. He is a really, really, really nice player. He makes the team a lot better just by being on the field. He's very, he's very creative, very, very good on the ball. He makes really smart decisions and even though some of the stuff he does doesn't show up on that stat sheet, he is making the team better, and the team would not have been as successful in this first part of the season without his influence. And so I have to give a ton of credit to the office and the scouting team for picking him out and recognizing what he could bring to the group. Um, Stein Spearing's another one that I was not super wowed by. Um, a guy who had been in okay leagues, not great leagues, leagues that are maybe comparable to MLS or a little below MLS level. Um, and letting Ojeda go, I thought, look, I don't know that this guy's going to come in and replicate everything that Ojeda did. And he hasn't, but he has brought his own sort of thing. He's integrated with the team really well. And so, the signings have really come in and done very well, uh,
Were you
kind of all
surprised?
over.
Were you surprised with what Angle has done, considering that he seemed to be a cast off from Cincinnati?
I was probably less surprised than other RSL fans were. We interviewed some Cincinnati podcasters prior to the season, and so we had a chance to talk about Angle. And one of the interesting things was that they all, excuse me, they all thought very positively about his time in Cincinnati. They all had very positive opinions about him personally. Um, and their complaints about him were actually complaints about how the team had been forced to use him. And so when they were like, oh, well, yeah, he wasn't like that great in this specific role. And they were like, but he had to play that role because everybody else who was supposed to do it was even worse or was hurt or got traded away. And the team didn't deal with that. So it was really interesting to hear them talk about Angle in that light and then be like, yeah, but otherwise he's a guy that we really trust and think highly of. And so that was positive for me when he was coming in to be like, you know what, he and Sam Junka will compete for that position, and whoever wins it, you know, the level of the play there is going to be decently high.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you bring in Angle, the hope was, I think the thing that hurt Angle maybe in the perception of RSL fans was the number, right? The price tag. I think
Yeah.
he was close to $1 million, 800,000 or something, coming from Cincinnati. So you're thinking, hey, they're getting rid of him. Why are they getting rid of him? And he's got this big price tag. It's kind of a gamble. But it turns out that yeah, he's been. I think he's had some moments. I think it took a while to get his feet under him here in Salt Lake, and but you notice when he's not there, and that's the one thing about these new signings. Even Solons, you notice when they aren't there, which is really surprising, and it's good,
Mhm.
right? No one thought I don't think anybody thought that Catranis would get. We haven't talked about Wanma, right? Sanabria, and
Yeah. And
I
we
was
haven't talked
so
about Salons, and we should talk about
yeah.
Salons.
I mean, he sat down Catranis, so it does when people say RSL is starting to get really deep. That's the truth. Well, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts on Solans? Let me ask you this question before
Yeah.
you do that because I think it's interesting. You talk about Pablo, and this is the weird stuff that rolls around my head and stuff. But as a coach, how do you have the courage? Seattle is known. There's some other clubs out there, but mostly um, what I've seen from Seattle that doesn't seem to have a lot of fear in putting young players in. And I think RSL over the last few years, Pablo, because of the situation they've been in where it's got, you got to win, you got to win, you got to win because they're, fighting for a playoff spot. There isn't a lot of freedom, or I feel like the coaching staff, we got to win, we got to win, we got to win. So we don't have time. We don't have any leeway to trust some 16, 18-year-old kid to come in. But if there's an injury, then they can come in like Gozo. He came in because of, frostbite at halftime in Minnesota, and Mark Chuk ended up getting loaned away. And what Diogo, the worst MLRSL DP signing
And
in
yeah, in recent
history,
history.
maybe. I mean, he's up
It's,
there.
he's going to be up there. Yeah.
I think of him and Shaqiri like in Chicago, but they were RSL. Fortunately, wasn't paying him $8 million.
Yeah.
But
For
yeah,
real.
so where is that balance? And maybe when they start winning, they feel a lot more comfortable and have that freedom,
Uh-huh.
the comfort to throw in some young kids. Because Solans didn't go in because he went in for injury too.
He went in because Victor Olatunji had that eye injury
Yeah,
at the beginning of the season. Yeah, I think you touched on something that was really insightful, which is a lot of teams are facing different balancing acts where they have some sort of excuse why they can't bring in the young kids, um, because they have to like win. And I think there's two sides to that. There's the team that is extremely successful. Think of the teams like the LAFCs or the Inter Miamis, where your expectation this year is to win trophies. And so you're not going to gamble on a kid unless that kid is like, going to revolutionize the game. You're like, we're going to play this kid this year, and this kid is going to Europe to a top team next season. Other than that, right, you're not bringing in lots of kids. Certainly not starting them. They might make late appearances, that kind of thing, but otherwise you're filling out your team with veterans. There's the other side to that, and it's not San Jose this year, but it's San Jose of like 2 years ago, really pre Bruce Arena. And it's kind of SKC of this year, but it's not by choice, it's by their ineptitude. Um, if you but think of San Jose of like a couple years back, they just weren't really good. They had lots of they had lots of players, they had coaches, the sum of their parts should have been better than they were, and they could never really figure that out. And every now and then they would kind of put something together and you're like, "Oh, this team might be something," and they would fall apart. That those underperforming teams by the same token are under so much pressure to win that they can't bring in young guys. San Jose actually has like a really good academy. They produce a lot of talent. Now, a lot of that talent comes through at other MLS clubs because there's not a pathway in San Jose, or at least there wasn't.
Diego Luna.
Diego Luna is one of those guys, right? San Jose, um, when they watched him score a winning goal in San Jose, I'm sure at least one, you know, administrator was like, yep, that guy used to be here. I knew he was talented then. We didn't create a pathway for him. Look at him go. Like, that they are having those moments. Anyway, they just, th-
Milanowski.
mhm. Another one. There's a bunch of those guys that come through. Anyway, I just think RSL is in this kind of sweet spot. We're not a big enough market and ownership group and club to where we have the weight of expectation. RSL is not expected to win a trophy every year. We are expected to compete for trophies sometimes. And the club has been good enough that truthfully, the fan base has an expectation that we are going to be in trophy competing conversations most years. And that's pretty reasonable in a league like Major League Soccer, where you have salary caps and stuff like that that kind of enforce parity. But it means that if RSL has a down year, it doesn't sink the ship necessarily. You can have more longevity in coaches, you can have more longevity in technical staff and stuff like that because you don't have the weight of expectation of being Inter Miami, of being LAFC. By the same token, the club has been run well enough that RSL usually makes the playoffs, is usually reasonably competitive in the league. And so you're not one of those bottom dwelling clubs who absolutely has to figure it out, absolutely has to start getting wins, and doesn't have the luxury of taking a shot on a youth player that doesn't work out. Because if you take that shot and that guy doesn't work out, you're just a loser still. RSL can kind of work some of those guys in because they have a mixture, a balance of veterans and youth and stuff like that. And so,
Yeah, as long as they keep winning, right?
yeah, as
Uh,
long as they keep being an okay team, they'll continue to have the space to do stuff like that.
yeah, that probably means being in between third and sixth place quite a bit,
Yeah.
right? In the table. When they're fighting for that last playoff spot, I can see why the pressure is just like, we can't throw that kid in. We can't throw that kid in. Even though he's tearing
Mhm.
it up in practice, what's he going to do? You have to go with what you believe in. And I agree with you. I think right now they are in a very good spot. And RSL, would be nice, but I don't think we're ever going to be Miami. I mean, we could be one of those clubs if they put it together and keep a level head and keep a narrow focus. They could be an Ajax or some a club that isn't in a big market but wins and people want to come play and they have a beautiful style of football.
Yeah, I think RSL is building out that identity to be a team that has pathways, and the young players, talented young players, should want to go play for him because there are pathways. And the upside of what you do with like an Andres Gomez, where you don't stand in the way, but you sacrifice the back end of your season, is that the next young guy, that comes along looks at you and says, when the time comes, you won't get in the way. When the time comes, you will help me move on. You will you will help me as a player. You won't inhibit me as a player. And so I will go and give you my work ethic and I will go and give you my talent. And so you end up getting better and better talent and more talent. And then like it's the thing, we hit it off with Andres Gomez, but then Dominic Marchuk didn't really hit off. You you need to replace like one good talent with like three good talents, right? You need to increase the volume because some guys will work out, some guys won't. And you don't want to be in a situation where it's like you bring in Dominic Marchuk and then he doesn't work out and your season falls apart. It's this thing that it takes a bit of patience, but I think in the long run, it will pay off for RSL as long as they continue to not stand in the way of their players. Being able to move on, they'll continue to replace one good talent with more than that, and guys will continue to come through and break through, and they will be contributors to the team. And
Yeah,
that
yeah,
will help RSL to save money and spend money where it really needs to be spent on the top end of difference makers of the team.
yeah. They find that sweet spot, um, and are comfortable creating that dynamic, creating that culture, and being that team that has the ability to fight for a title
Mm-hmm.
every other year or so, but stays in that sweet spot. I think that's really good. I think that's the direction they were headed, before, Dave Checketts had to sell.
Yeah,
And I think, and it's nice to be back in that sweet spot again. But let's go back. Other surprises,
Sergey
other
Solans.
players that, you can talk about Solans. We didn't talk about Wanma, but
I
um,
I mean, I the only thing I'll say about Juanma is I don't think I'm surprised by the level of his play. I think we knew that exactly what we were getting. I was surprised by that RSL felt they needed to do it because I didn't have any complaints about Katranis. I don't think that Katranis is like the greatest player in the world, but he's committed. And he does a lot of good things. And when they said they were moving to this kind of back three, back five system, I'm like, well, that actually benefits Katranis greatly because he had the engine to run up and down, and he's more offensive minded than defensive minded. And so I was like, this actually benefits him pretty well. I, you know, Junka can also play on that wing behind him if you really need that, but Junka could also play as the center back. So I'm like, this kind of solves the problem that you had trying to balance the minutes between these two guys. I didn't think we needed a Juanma, but he has raised the level, um, which has been, absolutely awesome. He's an incredible player. He deserves to be at the World Cup. And I suspect that he will be getting a lot of eyes on him at the World Cup, and the RSL probably won't be hanging on to him for a whole lot longer. Um, but I want to talk about Sergey Solans,
please.
and I don't think that he gets enough attention outside of RSL circles. He's starting to because his goal total is,
Creeping up.
hard. Yeah, it's hard to ignore that. Um, he's got 6 goals on the season. The thing about it, look, he's a pretty good finisher. Um, he's still a young player. His finishing will improve as he spends more time in the pros. All of that's true. The thing that is most impressive to me is that he looks so much more integrated into the squad. He looks so much more seamlessly a part of whatever RSL is doing on the field. The way he receives the ball, the way he passes the ball, the way he moves around, he's so much more connected to the players around him during the game than I thought should be possible for a player coming out of college like that. And he has seized his spot with the team, not just because he's scored 6 goals. I think some of those goals are goals that, Victor Olatunji probably also scores. Some of them not, but there's some stuff that he misses that Victor probably scores. So like it probably balances out. The difference is that when when Victor is on the field, you can see Victor does not look as connected to the teammates around him. He moves around and his movement is still good. This isn't necessarily a big criticism. It's just that he and his teammates don't seem to always understand what the other one is trying to do. And Sergey Solans just has a better understanding of the tactical plan, and he fits the tactical plan and he executes the tactical plan a little bit better than Victor Olatunji does. And that is a wild thing to me because Victor Olatunji has played in the Champions League. And I still struggle to wrap my head around this, but Sergey Solans is a lot more than his goal contributions.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think if we were going to balance out the positives and the negatives, there's not a lot of negatives, but the only one I can think of off the top of my head and it's not really a negative. It's just that they haven't figured out what to do with Victor, with
Mm-hmm.
Olatunji, and I don't know if that's I think you're absolutely right. Solans for some reason connects. Maybe it's because they're all kids out there and they just connect. Maybe he's not playing video games with them. I don't know, but he just and I don't know if it's he's getting a different. He looks like, we want Victor to get up there and hold the ball up and play off folks, and then they get him the ball. And he doesn't have the touch, and he just kind of gets out of sorts. And he was gonna start, and the pressure's just kind of building. Why he's not getting minutes, but they don't look. They look better when Solans is out there,
They look
and
better when Solans is out there.
they just do. And that is maybe the biggest surprise. It's not a negative on Olatunji because he is a specimen, and you would love to see him out there because RSL struggles. They pointed it out after I think the last game that they've given up seven goals on kind of set pieces and stuff in the box, driven balls into the box, and he would be a good asset to have in there for to defend and it's just that's the only surprise that really is for me is that he hasn't found a way to fit into the club. And it's a good thing to have.
I think it's a problem that he will probably sort out by the end of the season. I don't see a scenario where RSL doesn't need him to be really good. You know, RSL is going to need him to be effective this
Absolutely.
season, and so I think he will sort it out. I think he will start to push Sergey, and you could see already in some of these early games where Sergey has sometimes struggled to adapt to the physicality of the league, and center backs are pushing him around, and I mean, he's still kind of a kid, and he's not a fully grown man yet, and he's getting sort of out muscled by some of these guys. And there was one game in particular I was at. I wish I could remember who it was, but it doesn't matter. Sergey was getting bodied all over the place, right? And he was playing well, but there was this one center back in particular that was just knocking him around left, right, and center, and about, somewhere between 60 and 70 minutes, Sergey gets subbed off, and Victor Olatunji comes in, and the first thing that Victor does is lay that guy on his butt. Victor just comes in and just knocks him down. And that guy immediately wants to complain, wants to cry and stuff like that. And the ref's kind of like, you've been doing it to the other guy, right? The ref was like, I got nothing for you, bro. And that was this thing that, like, Victor has that kind of experience and stuff like that. And you could still see there's this quality in there, that he's hunting and he's excited to hunt for goals.
You
Um,
you you mentioned something that I want to kind of flip on
yeah.
Real Salt Lake because there's kind of like two kind of things that kind of like are gnawing at me, kind of like where can RSL get better? You can always get improved, but our center back play, I think you mentioned
Mhm.
it. I think Glad being in the center there in a back three has really invigorated him. And I do love Philip Quinton. I like him a lot. He's a young kid, but RSL struggles. They get they get pushed around back there. Their center backs are not a couple of players. I mean, Vera had some bite, but he didn't have a lot of size. And if it was me, and luckily for us, I'm not in charge. But the last couple of seasons, I've thought that RSL could use kind of like a big tree out there, not
Mhm.
displacing, but adding an option back there, like a Tim, what's his name from St. Louis that was bouncing around last season.
Ti- Tim Ream. Yeah.
No, not Tim. No,
Or no, sorry,
the
not Tim Ream.
big, the lurpy guy that was in St. Louis for a minute, and then
The redhead that went
yeah,
back to New York after that.
yeah, I think that exactly.
Yeah,
A guy like
he's
that.
as old as the league, but yeah. I know what you're talking about. And Bob will kill me for not remembering his name, but I'm with you.
But I
Um
think he's the same guy. But RSL doesn't have a presence, and I think that's why they are struggling on set pieces and defending in the box.
it's true. Some of it the defensive frailty of this team I think is really who I don't know how far we want to go into this, but it's multifaceted.
Let's
Uh
do. I mean, you've got Cabral, and I think um,
uh-huh.
the guy the last two seasons has covered up so much of the defensive lapses and frailties of this club because he is. I mean,
Because
he's getting
he's
close to
incredible.
being Raimondo-esque when it
He,
comes to
he,
two more seasons, and he might be an argument for the best keeper RSL's ever had. But
we're gonna have we're already if he retired today, we're going to have a conversation where it's like who are the best goalkeepers in RSL history, and the first two names in some order will be Ramondo and Cabral
yeah, yeah,
already,
he's my
regardless of what he
official.
does from here out.
Absolutely. Last year he was my official man crush, and no one has stepped up to be my official man crush this season. The first one was Matt Crooks, who could be playing in the Premier League next season, who is over at Hull, but he was my first man crush. I loved what Matt Crooks
I
brought
loved
to
him.
this
Yeah,
club, and oh man, he was just a boatload of intangibles that made people better. He made Gomez better. It
I
was him
yeah
connecting with Gomez that really created the ability for Gomez to shine two
I
seasons ago.
I talked a lot about Matt Crooks at the end of last season and at the start of this one as being the biggest thing the RSL didn't replace that caused the downturn last year. But when we talk about this defensive line, the it's a weird sort of thing that we have to kind of wrap our heads around because Cabral is so good. Cabral and the coaching staff have actually asked the back line to basically play more exposed and to trust Cabral to make saves, which he is making. Um, but part of that is on purpose because they want the team to be expansive and they want to control the ball and they want to be ready to counter and they want to push up and win the ball back in higher spaces and they don't want to drop off and play low blocks and they're not trying to play this park the bus back five. And so some of that is purposefully saying, yes, we are going to leave gaps, we are going to leave holes, and we are going to trust our players to succeed in positions where they're exposed. And yeah, that means we don't keep a lot of clean sheets. Um, but that's kind of part of their game plan in a weird way, not to concede goals, but to allow the trade-off. They're going to allow themselves to have those some of those situations, but they know that what they're going to have is a team that is set up to be more on the front foot, and they're going to go out and and attack games. I'm not going to say chase games because that's not the right way to think about it. They're going to go out and attack games and try and be the protagonist in the game rather than some reactionary team that just sits back. Um, but I do fundamentally agree with you. I think the team has not necessarily been great in terms of identifying and recruiting center backs. I think some of that has been that Glad has been good enough that they didn't really need to go out and replace him, and to go out and replace him would have cost them more than just keeping him around. And so you kind
He
of live.
is, yeah, he is. His salary is. I can see why they might not want to have $2 million wrapped up in center backs
Mhm.
because his salary has escalated out as he's stuck with the team. So part of it's probably
Yeah.
financial. But I love your post that they aren't parking the bus, which Pablo denied they ever do, but they did game in and game out last season.
Yeah. Um, I just think if you go buy another Glad, right? If Justin Glad is currently playing for Minnesota and you want to bring him to RSL, I think you end up paying him more than you pay Justin Glad right now because Justin Glad came through the team or whatever. It's the same sort of thing. Like when you stick with a company for a long time, your salary grows slowly. But if you jump between different companies, your salary grows very quickly. And for your company to replace you will cost them more than it would be to just give you a raise.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. And Justin is just good enough.
Yeah,
Uh, I mean,
exactly.
you're not in danger of him. I think he's been to the All Star game a couple of times, but he's just good enough. And yeah, where you don't want to get rid of him, you want to keep him around, but the center backs for a long time since uh, Borchers and Olave, you haven't had All Star perennial All Star quality center backs back there for Real Salt Lake. You've had some good ones,
Mhm.
some decent ones, but you know, Glad and Quentin and whoever else is back there, they're not, in the conversation for top 11 at the end of the season.
True. And I think the thing about Justin Glad's development is that Justin Glad did not have enough time spent playing with really, really good center backs, guys who were highly developed both intellectually and physically. And I'm talking like Nedum, right?
Yeah, Nedham. Yeah, thank you,
Glad.
Nedham. I was trying to think of who he might be the bridge there between all of those great
Mhm.
center backs. He might have been the best one since
Play,
Borchers and Olave.
yeah, playing next to Nedum was kind of Justin Glad's best, version of himself. That was the version of Justin Glad that was getting called into, January camps with the national team. And I think that potential was in him, but he didn't get enough time of that, right? He spends a lot of his career um being this guy that has to lead instead of learn. Um, and it's not that like Marcelo Silva doesn't have things to teach. Marcelo Silva's best version of himself was the one that was old and wore the captain's armband, but um, like Justin Glad, I think in a lot of ways because he entered the team at such a young age, didn't get a proper like mentorship period where he had older experienced center backs that he could learn from, guys who had really been around the block for a long time at high levels, and and who had a lot of wisdom to impart and stuff like that. And he has sort of had to develop it on his own. And he's been, the leader of the group and the guy that they rely on to organize and stuff like that. And he's not seen people do it better than him. He's not been in a locker room where guys are doing it better than him. And you need to be in locker rooms where guys are doing stuff better than you, because that helps you do it better. And so I think that Justin Glad, um, at the end of the day, has not necessarily reached his potential because RSL has not been good enough at giving him that opportunity to have guys do stuff better than he does it, and to be able to learn from them. Philip Quinton brings some good stuff. He's a good passer, man. But sometimes I'm like, you're 6'5". You need to win way more headers than
Yeah,
you do.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's just sort of that like identification process. Uh, PQ, same sort of deal. Is not a guy. that is your, is the rock of a defense, right? He's an okay guy that plays well in a highly functioning defense. If your defense is not highly functioning, he looks like a guy that gets exposed a lot.
Yeah.
Sam Junka can be the same sort of thing. When your defense is, functioning well, he looks like a good player. When your defense isn't functioning well, he doesn't look as good. Lucas Engel, I think, is a lot like that. I think he has a lot in common with Brian Vera, um, both, mentally and as a soccer player. DeAndre Yedlin, actually, this was a really interesting one. In some ways, he's playing out of position as that right center back, but since he really didn't think that he did well on the wing for them, that was a big thing. He was always that like kind of wing back player. That was the Yedlin that we saw in Seattle. That was the Yedlin that we got in Europe. That was the Yedlin we got in the national team. And that is not the Yedlin of today. He is not that wing back guy anymore. Um, it's a really interesting thing that he is in this defensive unit now, but he is in a way having to reinvent himself. Um,
Yeah, and
and
fortunately for RSL at this point, the front half of the team is doing so well that you don't really have to worry so much and focus on the defense. Because I love what you're saying about Glad. I think Glad would be um, like he needs an Olavi, he needs a Borchers. I mean, he would be a good 1A, a number
Mhm.
two. Like you need somebody a bigger, stronger, taller presence back there next to him, and that would be two. I don't know whoever it is, Tim Parker. That's who came to me.
Tim Parker, it just
Yeah.
came to me. I'm so glad you remembered. Tim
So yeah,
Parker.
and then so we can belabor that. Don't belabor this point, but there's one other thing that I've been watching, and it goes back to Guy Lavogie, and then we can jump on. But the RSL midfield, I think they are missing one thing, and that is someone to the midfield offense and defense is begging for someone to take over, to kind of be the voice, to be maybe we're just too used to, it's getting to be a long time
Mhm.
ago, but the way Kyle Beckerman, Javi Morales commanded the midfield. If it wasn't Kyle, it was Javi, and they were
Mhm.
directing that team. And it seems like Guy Lavogie, he's got all the talent, and we watched Diogo Gonzalez just kind of, cash checks that back there. But I
Yeah,
think,
just
and you see Diego Luna trying to be that player. But as soon as RSL finds that player, I think the sky is the limit for this team. They're just missing that one player to really become the leader and the general in the middle there. And
yeah.
maybe that's
I
just me. I don't know.
honestly, no, I think it's a really insightful point. I think that's a big reason that Noel Caliscan cannot be displaced from the team right now
Absolutely.
because he is a connector. He's glue. He's a communicator. He talks to the back line. He talks to the front line. He talks to the wings.
He
Um,
talks to the
he
ref.
he talks to the ref. He organizes things. He, it's one of his talents is that he is an effective communicator, and his skill level, can be, we can talk about that, forever, but he does some things well and he does some things not well, and sometimes he surprises you. But like he doesn't do a lot of things wrong. He's not the most impressive player, but he doesn't do a lot of things wrong. But the midfield is worse without him because when he leaves, you don't have somebody who replaces that part of it, that lead and communicate and organize and stuff like that. And that's what you're talking about. Like Kyle was that guy, and you would love to marry the communication aspect of it with, Kyle Beckerman also being like the first or second best defensive midfielder in the US men's national team pool, right? You want to marry those two things, a player who is one of the best in their position with a player who is also a really effective, efficient communicator and leader. I think it says a lot that RSL consistently puts the armband on Rafa Cabral. I, he's a great leader in the locker room. I am super stoked to have him. I am a firm believer that your goalie should not wear the armband on the field.
I
The
don't
armband
disagree with that. We've had
should
that
go to an
conversation.
outfield player. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had that conversation because, and that's maybe that's what RSL is waiting for is for that player to step up and become. Emeka had it for a while, but Cabral came in and just kind of took over. Emeka struggled with
Yeah.
injuries at the end of last season, and
I
he's
think,
working
yeah,
through
I
it
think it
this
was a
year.
little, I think it was a little too much too quickly for Emeka.
Yeah,
He had an excellent season. And same sort of thing. He's an effective communicator. He's a really smart guy. He's an organizer and and he has leadership qualities. And Pablo always talked about Emeka being very self-coached, self-driven, not needing the coaches to identify and like lead him out on all of the stuff. But like he basically went from college to captain in like 3 seasons, something like
yeah,
that, 2, 3 seasons. Um, and and I'm not saying that he couldn't do it, but it was a lot of growth happening really, really quickly. And it would have been good for him to be like vice captain. You know what I mean? To have somebody to learn from, to be mentored by.
yeah. So, kind of any other thoughts on RSL that I know we're going to talk about? I want to get to Luna and kind of jump in with the World Cup stuff and talk about Luna and Gozo and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
I
But
have kind of one final thought about RSL to wrap up. And it's sort of the, we've talked about a lot of the good stuff that RSL has done. This is one of the things that I see in RSL that could lead us into some back end of the season struggles. Um, I'm not making doom and gloom predictions here. I want to be clear. I'm just saying these are things that the team will need to continue working on. RSL right now, if you look at their starting 11, RSL's starting 11 is as competitive a starting 11 as you're going to find outside of like the top 2 or 3 teams in the league, right? Who spend all the money. They they have good players in every position. They have a clear identity and they don't have any glaring weaknesses anywhere on the field. Despite what some people on on social media might say about some of the center backs, it's just truthfully you can dissect any center back or any defensive unit in the league, and you're not going to find a single unit that doesn't have the same sort of stuff that RSL deals with, even teams that aren't giving up a lot of goals, right? Like you'd start to dissect them player by player, and you're going to find somebody in there that you feel the same about as PQ or Glad or Angle or Junka or whoever.
yeah,
Like
and those are RSL center backs are good.
they are good.
They are good,
So
and
yeah.
so I don't want to. I want to make that point, but keep going.
So yeah, like center backs don't come egg my house. We love you guys. PQ is gonna come and find me. No,
He's gonna make
I
you read
guess
a
the
book.
exactly smart guy.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
the point is more that RSL's starting 11 and a few of the subs off the bench are good, but when you start to when impact players start to break down, RSL's ability to impact the game off the bench is not as strong as some of our rivals, right? And when you think about who are our rivals, I'm not necessarily talking about like Colorado. I'm talking about teams that are in like the top 5 of the table. Those are our rivals, and some of them just have more options off the bench than we do. And for us sometimes too, our options off the bench are high um like high potential but low reliability.
Yeah,
Um right. And I'm gonna be kind of mean to Aiden Hezerkani, but it's in a very loving way. He's high potential but low reliability right now because he's such a young player. Now he needs those minutes. We have to give him those minutes and we have to take that risk on him, but it is a risk. And sometimes he won't deliver. Sometimes he will get outrun, or sometimes he will miss, or whatever. And that's part of the game that RSL plays with those guys. But as like if Morgan Gilavogi or if Diego Luna struggle in a game, if Pablo Mastroeni has to bring them off the field and replace them with somebody else, it's a drop off. If Sergei Solans comes off and Victor Olitucci comes on, right now it's a drop off. I have a lot of hope and faith that in the future it won't be. By the end of the season, it won't be a drop off, and that we will look at those two guys and we'll be like, it doesn't matter who plays. Both of those guys are studs. But there's a lot of other positions, right? When Noel Caliscan and Stein Spearings aren't playing together, there's a drop off. And I like the guys behind him, but there is. And so I this is just the thing that I see about RSL's current roster construction is that there's high upside, but there's a bit low reliability, and there's potential for struggle. And if Gozo and Luna especially get picked up post World Cup or in the summer transfer windows, and teams come for them because they want them in preseason training camps, they don't want to bring them in mid-season, then that's really going to hurt RSL because RSL is not in a position to replace them right now.
Well, that's a good point, and I agree with you. I've noticed Pablo loves to ride players, so to speak. He gives them a lot of minutes, and if they're really
Mm-hmm.
good, who was I? Oh, there was one player that I was thinking of that he by the end of the season, Pablo puts so many minutes on a lot of the players he relies on that by the end of the season, RSL is kind of out of gas. We've seen that as they've 4 or 5 seasons in a row. The wheels just come off at the end of the season, and that's
Mm-hmm.
probably an issue with depth, like you're pointing out, but it's also an issue with not having the courage to kind of spread the minutes around early in the season and give
Yeah,
some young players some experience. So you're not throwing in a player in a playoff game in Portland, in a season-ending playoff game, right? And expecting them to
yeah,
make a difference. The kind of like I think it was Caliscan last season that in Portland that the moment was just too big at the moment for him
sure.
in the Portland playoff game. So
Yeah,
I agree with you, but they do
McAnally.
have. We'll see what happens. Don't mean to cut you off there, but we'll
No,
see what
you're good.
happens with July 13th after when the window opens. What kind of ownership RSL has? Do they see it as, hey, we're doing good, we don't need to add players, or are they like you and they're saying, hey, you know what, this is a great window, we need to add players so that we have stuff in the tank when playoffs roll around.
Yeah,
Really
that
interesting window coming up.
it's a it's really interesting, and that point about having something left in the tank at the end of the season is really, I think, is really insightful. I think it's really undervalued. We think players can play every minute and it doesn't take a toll on their bodies, but it does. I think Mekanelli is a player that is a really good example of that. That he probably needed his minutes managed a little bit more than they were, and he is not going to do it for himself. None of those guys are. They're not going to go to the coach and be like, "Sorry, I got to rest this week. I don't feel good. My body's falling apart." They're not going to say that. He's going to be like, "You want to
No.
play?" And they're going to be like, "Yes, please. 90 minutes, thanks." um,
Yep. So what about
Luna
we kind
World
of
Cup.
gone over Real Salt Lake. I think we covered everything other than I want to talk about the World Cup and Luna and Gozo and all of that.